Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for this election night primary coverage here downtown Providence. A number of the races we've been getting results in, and you can find out more on GoLocalProv.com. With Gina Raimondo turning back challenger Matt Brown, Spencer Dickinson having a sizable portion of that race, looking like Alan Fung emerging potentially as a victor over Patricia Morgan in the GOP primary, and Giovanni Ferrosi looks still too close to call in the lieutenant governor's race. And in the Providence mayor's race, Jorge Alorza with 58%, Kobe Dennis with 24%, Bob DeRobio with 17%. I'd like to welcome my next and final guests here into the studio who are going to be able to provide some astute political insights. I've got former state representative, former deputy secretary of state, now heads up Stages of Freedom, Ray Rickman, joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you see right behind me, conservative, not crazy, Michael Graham, political editor, is joining us up from New Hampshire, where they just had a primary yesterday, but knows New England politics and has been keeping a close eye here on Rhode Island.
Absolutely.
Michael, what did you think of the results today?
I think that having Gina Raimondo set up for November is the best possible news for Republicans, because she shows up as somebody that people are ready to vote against. And, you know, it's interesting to me. I think about having lived now in New England for about 15 years, but before that, I ran Republican primaries down south. And let me stop and explain this to people in Rhode Island. In other states, there are so many Republicans, they run against each other. And so coming up here and seeing, you know, obviously how deep blue their region is, think about this for a second. The most popular governor in America, Republican Charlie Baker. Number 4 on the list, Republican Chris Sununu of New Hampshire. Number 7 from the bottom, Democrat in Rhode Island, Gina Raimondo. And so Republicans are delighted to have her on the ballot.
But here's the million-dollar question, Michael, and Ray can speak to this as well. We have a history of three ways here in Rhode Island, with Bob Healy getting some of the protest vote back in 2014. Of course, Link Chafee having been in one as well. Joe Trillo running as an independent and a staunch Trump supporter. The minute he entered the race, Michael, we saw a number of, anecdotally, social media Republicans go up in arms and say, you just handed it back to Gina Raimondo. What's your thought with that? I mean, as Funk does, the Republican Party have to go out and beat the drum that a vote for Trillo is a vote for Gina?
I don't know they have to beat the drum for it. You know, I was involved in the Tea Party movement from its founding. I wrote a book about it. And one of the things that always impressed me is while the high-profile miscues of the Tea Party got a lot of national press, they backed some really bad candidates in places like Delaware and Nevada. The fact is, they made a lot of pragmatic choices. Marco Rubio, people forget, was a Tea Party guy. And politically active people tend to understand the math. They may not know the details of House Resolution 127, but they get the idea that if you really want ABG, anyone but Gina, you've got to coalesce your votes. And there are other elections that I've seen in the past where when it became clear that it was a two-person race, when the money started getting spent and the ads were running and the two teams going at each other, that third candidate really dropped down to insignificant numbers. That may not happen here, and given the 50-50 America that we live in, 1% could be the difference between Gina Raimondo being reelected or not. So I'm not making any predictions, but I will say I have seen situations in the past where the third party candidate became really an irrelevance because people wanted to get in what they perceived as the real fight.
So, Kate, I want to go back to our last election where Bob Healy, and it's a big controversy whether he spent $54 or $56.
I thought it was $26.
No, you're off. Anyway, that's what he spent, and he got 22% of the vote because people didn't like Fung. They didn't like either the Democrat or the Republican. Trillo is a very interesting man, and an arch conservative and a Trumpite, and you ought to be for him, by the way, politically. He's going to get more than 10%. I can promise you that. And that's enough for the governor to win.
Well, I'll tell you, last time GoLocal was in the field with John Della Volpe from Harvard in the polls, we had, John had Trillo at 16. And I want to say the minute the poll came out, maybe 10 minutes later, Trillo had a press release out saying Trillo has 16% of the vote. I mean, you thought that it was Christmas and Easter all wrapped in one.
Right.
Again, he thought that 16 was, he's trumpeting it. Clearly not enough to win. I mean, no two ways from that 16% number, but enough to bolster his campaign.
Let me say this again. The voters of Rhode Island, we don't know what they want, except they want change. And this governor's going to have to convince them that she's more changed than they think. But I think the Democrat starts with 40%. And do they go up from there?
Right.
And that's the issue here. Fung probably starts with, well, he probably starts with 40%.
Right, exactly.
So this isn't the kind of blue state people like to say it is. I can remember Governor DePrete, Governor Almond, we've had 4 Republican governors. And so, hey.
Game's
I'm
open.
I'm in Massachusetts. We haven't had a Republican governor since Mitt Romney. And so.
Wait, I'm sorry, but even Massachusetts has had 4. You want to hear something? These 2 states are the same. They like to vote Democrat for state rep and senator, and then after that, everything's on the table. Massachusetts has had 4, is that right? 4 Republican governors out of the last 7.
I have to dispute that because you appear to be including Charlie Baker.
Yes, I am. Don't get
he's
technical
not
with
a
me.
Republican in any sense of the word.
How many times have you used the word rhino, Michael? And then the
I'm
last.
not using rhino. He's not even. He's an I-know. I mean, his brand
No, he's not.
And this is it. Absolutely, his brand is to be not a Republican, and he openly talks about not being a Republican. And so
he's not a
very smart
traditional
man,
Republican.
because in Massachusetts you can't win in the current climate as a Republican. And so I think Charlie Baker's doing something smart. But I go back to this idea of where the Rhode Island voters are. I mean, it's to me, if I had to project a path forward, if the campaign is about Raimondo, yes or no, if they can make it a referendum on do you want to do this again, then I think that's when the third-party candidate loses a lot of juice. If other factors come in, for example, in Massachusetts, in the Republican primary, Charlie Baker lost 100,000 votes to a total fringe candidate. When I say fringe candidate,
correct.
I mean
Republican primary. Correct.
In the Republican primary, exactly, where he lost 100,000 votes to a guy, Scott Lively, who literally wrote a book called The Pink Swastika that argued that the problem with Nazis wasn't that they were Nazis, the problem was that they were gay. And that was the real problem. So this guy was a total loony burger. Why would 100,000 people vote for him? Well, because he was pro-Trump. And they wanted to send a message about they wanted the Republican leadership in Massachusetts to be pro-Trump. So
now,
if that factor comes
I'm interrupting you, but can I tell you something? Trillo, who I know quite well, I've been impressed how he's able to hold his fire so far. But Trillo can say and do things to upset women, minorities, college professors, I mean everybody. And let's see what he does in the next 2 months. But I repeat this. Kate said this to you, and I think you disagreed with her. The Republican Party needs to tell Mr. Trillo, we'll get you, he doesn't want to judge you, we'll get you something to get out. Right. Because he's going to get enough to cause the governor to win.
Well, Michael,
that's definitely a possibility. Like I said, if the storyline is Gina, yes or no, that's a different story. If the storyline is prove to me that I want to give my voice to Trump, no one's backing Mr. Trump, I'm going to show my loyalty to President Trump, then that is a real problem for a family.
So talk with us. I do want to raise this point, Michael. We were out today at the polls, and when Gina was in Providence, she had told the reporters, if I'm not reelected, Rhode Island's going to lose jobs. And so we asked Alan Fung what he thought about that statement. Besides thinking it was ridiculous, he said no, and then kind of took the tack of, I'm pretty much he said, I'm going to be a Charlie Baker Republican. No, he said we need to be more like Mass, we need to be more like Baker. And I'll tell you, it was from the economic standpoint. He was taking a whack at the governor for the corporate welfare here, if you will,
right.
But clearly signaling, I mean, the popularity, I'm sure, of Baker. And here we are in Rhode Island, and someone improving but still struggling economy, sort of to that great white hope of the North being Massachusetts. Is that prudent of of Fung to maybe again tie his tail there to Baker?
The upside is that it makes it easier for Democrats to vote for him. The upside is that it puts him more in the spirit of Rhode Island as a whole. The downside is that it makes the frustrated, hardcore Republicans, the talk radio Republicans, more likely to vote for a third party because they get frustrated with that conversation. I think the guy who's really figured out the secret sauce, if you will, is Governor Chris Sununu in New Hampshire. Governor Sununu in New Hampshire, we did some polling at New Hampshire at nhjournal.com where I work, and we discovered that there was no correlation at all between Sununu's popularity and Trump's popularity. Trump's popularity would go down, Sununu would stay the same. Trump's popularity would go up. Sununu, there was no correlation. And he's done that without doing what Baker has felt the need to do, which is to be aggressively anti-Trump. Now, Sununu's no Trump I'm a no Trump fan, but he's been more casual about it than I have. I mean, I beat the crap out of the idiot president all the time. But Sununu has been very nuanced about it. He's picked his fights with Trump, opportunities to disagree, celebrates the economy, and by doing so, he had no Republican primary opponent. The Republican Party's rallying around him. He's the fourth most popular governor in the country, in part because he has all the Republicans and a significant number of independents.
I think, we had some Republicans in here earlier, Representative Anthony Giarrusso. Even when we talked to Alan Fung today, I think the Republicans here, most of them, if they're not Trump supporters, have figured out that fine line of, the economy's great, I like that part of the Trump administration, I don't like the 98% of it. But, the president says or does something, Charlottesville, other episodes as well, that, have to answer. So I think a huge X factor is something that the Trump administration or the president does before November, something that somehow then gets brought back down to the local issue and becomes a campaign issue. But speaking of local, I do have to, Michael, I'm going to tack here a little bit to Ray, and we'll bring you in the fold if you want to weigh in about the capital city. As the saying goes, as the city goes, so goes the state. Now, we did get some preliminary numbers that Mayor Jorge Elorza looked to be at about 58%, with about 80% of Providence reporting. Kobe Dennis at 24%, Bob DeRobio at 17%. What's your thoughts on these numbers?
I'm shocked. I'm surprised. One of the political commentators said that Kobe Dennis did so well because of the teenager being killed, and a black teenager being killed, and he talked and dealt with it better than DeRobio, and they believe that a lot of minority voters went to him. But I am surprised at the mayor's level of success in this primary. But I think, talking about both Kobe Dennis and my friend Bob DeRobio, they did not run the best campaigns. And in the fall, meaning now, we will see Dee Dee Whitman run a better campaign, much better. Spend money, campaign harder, get out there, and we'll see what that means.
There have been certain people in certain circles, this is, if you're following, Michael, the Providence mayoral race, an entrant of a political operative of Dee Dee Whitman, Eastsider. Some have called her the grandmotherly Bruce Sunland.
Yeah, I don't see anything grandmotherly about her, but anyway, she's a young woman way past 50. But Kate, this, I'm not answering a question you didn't ask. Personality sometimes really plays into something. People voted for George Bush because they want to have a beer with him.
Yeah.
Not because of his political policies. And I think you're going to see more of that from Dee Dee Whitman.
Of a personable, relatable nature.
A personality. I think you're going to want to have 2 beers with her. But also, you're going to be convinced that she could govern this city.
So very interesting looking forward. Now, hasn't come up in a while here, Michael. The talks of Providence is obviously the 800-pound elephant gorilla, if you will, the unfunded pension liability. Right. The mayor continuously comes out and lauds the city's financial situation. But I think to the average Providence resident, obviously looking at taxes, we just saw some issues of big buildings here downtown going at a fire sale, if you will, for way less than they had been valued at. And of course, the domino effect comes and says, well, if they're valued at that, I want to talk with the city's tax assessor. The big talk of the big B has not been broached in forever here, is Providence on the verge of bankruptcy. But, as you look at Rhode Island politics, we just saw the primaries here. Your take on the city of Providence, Michael?
Well, the power of governance, there was a time when you could make the case, look, don't like me, hate me, whatever, I can get the job done. And you've had those kind of successful politicians in the past. We're not in that moment right now. There's a template over everything that has to do with your partisanship and this kind of tribal politics. Whose side are you on? And it really gets in the way. And I don't like it. I think it's destructive. It's a dumb way to run campaigns. You would never pick a doctor because he was somebody or she was somebody that was hung out with your friends. If you're a good doctor, you're a good doctor. I want you to do the good work. But voters aren't thinking that way. Poll after poll shows that either the number one or number two consideration among voters, and this is even for local, like state legislative elections, is your position on Trump. Democrats want to know that you hate Trump. Republicans want to know that you love Trump. What's that got to do with governing a city or setting tax rates for Rhode Island? Nothing. But that's where voters are. And then add on to that the template of social media. I don't think we think often enough about how much social media takes away social. That is, before social media, you'd be sitting in an office somewhere waiting for an appointment. You'd talk to the people around you. You'd learn something. You'd find out what's going on in the neighborhood. Now you sit there with your face in the phone and you don't look up, and there's 500 people all doing the same thing. And what's in social media? It's Trump. It's national stories. It's the controversy of the day. And it makes it harder to get people to focus on, hey, our city, it has real problems. Or, hey, our state, why is our state lagging with one of the worst recoveries in the country, while other states nearby, like Massachusetts and New Hampshire, are booming?
But you know what? This goes back to people not connecting the dots. In the city of Providence, the majority of people are unhappy with the potholes, with the dismal school system. 2/3 of people in this city work 40 hours basically for minimum wages and at McDonald's, and they are unhappy. Now on the east side where I live, folks are very unhappy. I was riding with a friend the other day and we went over 4 bumps in a row. Boom, boom, boom. He says, "What is this, Beirut?" And they don't connect this to the city government, to the mayor. They just don't. We have 1,000 unsolved police shootings, and nobody gets blamed for them because they're not being thoughtful. Now, I'm never running for office again. The voters are not being thoughtful. And the Trump thing is that too. I talk to just what you just said. I talk to people all day long, and they blame the entire world's problems on Trump.
Right.
And I say, well, he might be guilty of 2%, 10%, but they're just not thinking about anything other than him. And it's dangerous because we've got a governor, we've got a mayor, we've got a state rep, we've got a speaker of the House, all people who have power that we should be thinking about, focusing on, having opinions on, and we're too busy. This is back to Trillo. No, I'm serious. Trillo's going to do better than you think because the Trump folks are going to. And I don't want us to forget this. Trump won 19 out of 39 towns and cities in Rhode Island. He won every place except the towns on the water. So whatever was in the water saved Hillary. But there are a lot of people sitting here willing to think Trump-like, 40%. And so, again, I think, and again, I now know nothing because I thought that the mayor, if he got 50%, I'd eat my hat. And I'm going home and get myself something.
A little salt and pepper.
Yeah, a little something. But so I think the voters are interesting people.
They certainly are, and a kind of parting thought here with Michael. obviously with Matt falling to Governor Raimondo, and again, the lieutenant governor's race to close to call as I'm kind of listening to my my team back here. You know, there was a thought, it seemed like there was this groundswell, and there were some progressive victories across the country. Obviously, Raimondo held firm. You know, if Ruggenberg is to emerge, it's 1% at this point, Michael. You know, is that really a victory lap for the progressives in Rhode Island?
You know, my column in the Boston Herald tomorrow, which I urge everyone to read, is about this lackluster performance by progressives. The fact is that there have been some high-profile wins like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York and Ayanna Pressley here in Boston. But last night in New Hampshire, which Bernie Sanders won overwhelmingly, 60 to 38%, not a single Bernie Sanders progressive in any of the premier races won. The hard-charging, far-left progressive Democratic candidate, Steve Marchand, the mayor of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, got killed by kind of a sleepy, quiet establishment, former state senator Molly Kelly. In the congressional race we had a woman come in from out of state with literally millions of dollars, and she was a woman vet, and she was an Obama administration official, and her ads actually tagged with, "Let's make America again." You know, she was going to go get Trump. And she got crushed by a local restaurant owner who's kind of this local community guy who'd held local office and everybody knew. And it was a triumph of, and maybe this will cheer Ray up, the triumph of local values and local connections over this progressive tide. There have been places where it has worked, no doubt about it. There have been a couple of spots here and there, you know, in Kansas, an unusual winner, progressive. But by far and away, Democrats are going to have a good year this year because they have candidates who reflect their local communities. And in places like Boston, that means crazy lefty. But in places like Texas, that means more moderate. And that's the Democratic Party that's going to emerge. And when they take control of the House, here's what's interesting. What does Speaker Pelosi, and of course we all know no matter what, she's going to be Speaker. I love all this talk about, oh, I don't know, but are you kidding me? She has it in writing, in blood, she's absolutely
Oh, we don't know about the blood. Go ahead.
But what's she going to do when she has this caucus where she has all these hardcore progressive, you know, activists and all these suburban, hey, they didn't send me here to impeach Trump, they sent me here to fix health care. It's going to be fascinating come January 1.
But Kate, I know you want to wrap up, but can I tell you something? It is time that Democrats be Democrats and not Republican light. And this is what we've had since Bill Clinton, that Democrats aren't that far different than Republicans. We're talking about a governor whose reputation is as a corporate, you know, she could be a Republican. Seriously. And now you've got a
free taxpayer-funded giveaway education.
And she could be
Republican too. I
knew this
was
going to be a good pairing.
So guess what?
I'm hanging out with.
Now you know what? I just read a little bit about you, so I could come on here and pretend we were old friends and that I knew you. But could I tell you a secret? That was phony. She put it up for election purposes. Less than 17% of the students at that college could take advantage of it. It's a sham, and everybody knows it. So Democrats do this garbage sometimes, fool people.
We've certainly written articles here about being pressured by Matt Brown to the left as she approached the election cycle. Even she was pressured to the left by Lake Chafee before he decided not to run.
Yes.
But it'll be interesting to see how both candidates on the Republican and Democratic and independent sides approach Election Day in November. So, Michael Graham, I would so like to thank you for joining us. It's been very insightful and entertaining here as we're continuing to get election results in that you can find out on GoLocalProv.com. And of course, former state representative, former deputy secretary of state, now heads up Stages of Freedom, Ray Rickman. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And don't go anywhere. I'll be back to wrap up here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.